Begin.
Welcome, family, to Wisdom Village, a center for authentic connection, soulful learning, and courageous healing. We're here talking about the journeys of transformation that we're on right now. We hope that by telling our stories of, and shedding light on, our own physical, emotional, and spiritual process of transformation, you will be inspired as you quest along your path and be reminded that you are not alone in this transition of consciousness. For more information, head on over to wisdomvillage.net.
I'm your host, Laura.
And I'm her co-host, Victoria.
Today we're talking to Amanda Easton from the Tiny Star Project, where she specializes in women's retreats and circles. And she brings together children and parents and specializes in the connectedness of spiritual relationships. Thank you for coming to our podcast today, and tell us about your project.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be able to share my story, and as I move further into this journey of entrepreneurship and motherhood, I just really feel it an honor to be able to share my story and hopefully help others share their story as well. So thank you for having me. So Tiny Star Project developed out of my desire to really help children and mothers with that relationship. And I taught for 20 years in public and private schools, spiritual venues. I volunteered for CASA, court-appointed special advocates. So I've really lived my life in such a way that I've been surrounded by children and parents. So when I quit teaching, stepping out of the classroom, really something awoke in me that really I feel like I was being called to serve in another way. And so I started with girls groups, really helping young girls with social and emotional skills based on what I saw really on the playground as a teacher, which is where a lot of the learning happens for kids. And that's how I started that. And then I based on my own desire to explore my connection with nature as a woman, I started the Wild Woman Project Circles. And so that was really a personal journey for myself that turned into me sharing that with my friends and now sharing it with women that I don't know. So I hold the monthly circles for that reason, really. And it's been a wonderful journey for me to connect with the natural cycles and with other women and create a community. So that's what we've been focusing on so far.
How did you come up with the idea for naming your project Tiny Star Project?
Yeah, so I believe that we all have a spiritual light inside of us that is almost like a sun, right? The sun is our largest star in our galaxy, and Earth wouldn't exist without the sun. And we really, I believe, exist and live based on this light inside of us. And so I tried a lot of different names for this, but when I found, the Tiny Star Project, I felt like it reflected the idea that we all exist, both in the physical realm, but we have a spiritual essence inside of us. Mm-hmm. To me, that is really like light, and so that's where the name really came from.
So something that I was super curious to ask, first of all, when I read all about you, I was just super blown away and super impressed by all the things that you've been able to do. A mother of 6 alone is impressive. And then to run businesses on top of that and be able to find yourself and show up the way that you are is really incredible. I'm just going to go ahead and dive deep into some really heavy questions if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So that idea of like living out of the light that's inside of you. I think that a lot of people resonate with that, whether it's on a conscious level or just a deep knowing. How did you come to terms, I guess like in my personal experience, because I was a teacher as well for at-risk kids, I've always kind of grown up with people saying, you have this light about you, but my struggle with that is realizing, what do I do with that? It just seems so heavy, there's so much weight to it, because we are, as in my belief, and like you said, as mystical and magical as the sun. How the heck do we live up to something like that? And like, what does the process of accepting and stepping into that light look like for you? Because what you're juggling, it doesn't even sound like you're juggling. It just sounds like you are just stabilized and balanced and appropriately exerting your energy into these fields of play that are just, it's just nourishing an entire earth of people, it sounds like, without even going to your classes. That's what it feels like.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So let me just first say that I'm not perfect. Like, I have a lot of challenges in my life, right? Being a mom of 6 children is not easy, and 2 of my children were adopted, so that comes with its own struggle. And although motherhood was really fairly easier for me as I was younger, once I went through a divorce, that was really like a dark place. So when you ask about living from this place of light, I really think it's also acknowledging the challenges that are really in front of us, that really face us right here in this physical realm. So I want to say that I learned how to start living in the light by going through a really dark period, right? A divorce that was very challenging, children with attachment issues, you know, a challenge in terms of how I could connect with my children through that process, right? Becoming a little bit more separate from them.
How can I show up for them in the way they need to?
Yeah, when you're a mom 95% of the time, and then you go through a divorce, and, you know, there's some shared parenting issues. It really brings up a lot if you identify solely as a mother, which is what I did. So
did past tense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I really was attached to this idea of, oh my gosh, I'm a mom, you know. And I was sitting in a counselor's office one time, and he was like, you might lose your children for a period of time during this divorce. And I was like, that's like every mom's worst nightmare, right? Every mom's worst nightmare is to say, wow, I could lose, you know, my children. And I think on some level all mothers deal with this at some point, disconnection from their children, right? Whether it's like a baby in the NICU, right? Or a child who comes home with reactive attachment disorder when you do an adoption, or a terrible toddler who's like really resisting us, or a teenager who's using drugs or alcohol, or a child who goes to college or gets married. So I really feel like all mothers can relate to this struggle in some way. So what did I do? I really had to focus on myself. I really had to turn it inward to where the darkness lived, all the challenges and all the reasons why my life looked like it did, right? And being a teacher at that time was really powerful, because children have been my biggest teachers, period, in my life. They have taught me
poetically snapping to that.
Everything I feel like I've learned has been from little people, you know. So in that way, that carried me a bit through that difficulty, right? Being around a lot of children. And so I really had to get in tune with myself and dig deep, really. So I started a yoga practice right around that time. So I've been practicing yoga for 10 years. And
just out of like this inspired thought that was the next step you needed to take?
Yeah, it was really like a noticing that as a mother, and a lot of mothers, again, I think can relate to this, we give up just so much of taking care of ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, to raise our children, right? Just to get the food on the table, to get the kids out the door for school and soccer, and just our culture really, it's difficult to be a mom right now, and especially if you're a working mom and, you know, doing multiple things. So getting in tune with my body was like my first step of really discovering that. So starting a yoga practice, dancing again. I had danced when I was a kid, and I started dancing hip hop and Afro Caribe and all this fun dance. So that was a real light for me.
Okay.
Yep. And really learning how to get in tune with that. And you're asking about making manifest really this light, right? The point from which we understand that there is a light, there's a life force, there's a vitality in us that is really energy. And energy is all about potential, right? Energy is a constant realm of potential. So it's really about learning how in your own unique life you can manifest that, right? I couldn't do everything. I couldn't go get my PhD. I wanted to, and I just decided not to. I decided to focus on other things. So I finished my education, my master's degree, and really it is a lot of just work on the earth, but also touching into the spiritual realm. So I started meditating,
Right.
I went on women's retreats myself. Like last year I went on a yoga retreat to Panama, which was really impactful. And I found that to be really nourishing for my spiritual life. So really accessing as much spiritual support as I could.
I was just about to ask about that specific question, if you don't mind, the idea of support, because I guess the biggest obstacle I've seen both in my personal life and in wanting to help other people, which is why I think we're all here to exist, is what does that support look like when you're in that state? I've worked with a lot of traumatized youth and have been in, treatment facilities myself. And my core belief is I wouldn't be where I'm at now had I not met the mentors and the guides and the teachers and the people that could help me through and understand what was coming up. A lot of people that I've met had said, excuse me, meditation is one of the best ways to start the journey, and I agree 100% with that. I also understand what happens when a child that wasn't taught emotional regulation all of a sudden brings up these emotions and these feelings that are happening inside of them, and they don't know what to do with them. On a physical plane, they're lost. So
Huge. Yeah, so 2 pieces of my work with children have been really important in this aspect, because you can't really talk to children about their trauma directly. You can't really, it's really difficult to do, is art and music. So art and music are 2 components of what I do with the girls group that are very significant, right? Even sound bowls, chimes, all different kinds of music, flutes, to really bring them to another space to work with that trauma. And so I find art to be one of the most powerful modalities we can use with children is art, because they love it. They're still in that playful mode. They're still willing to mess up. They're still willing to be imperfect. There's a little book called Ish, and it's a children's book, but it's so amazing. It's about this child who keeps trying to make a fire truck, and it doesn't look right, and he keeps crumbling it up. So I do art projects around kids with that, like crumble your paper up, paint it, make it messy, get messy,
be okay
play.
with failure.
Yeah, so I think it's really about letting children experience that firsthand without psychologizing it too much, But I want to say something about the trauma, because I've worked with children with trauma as well.
It's a big issue.
Yeah, I have a special education endorsement to my teaching certificate, and so I've been in that place a lot where, you see trauma is the underlying factor for a lot of these children. And I did some volunteer with Colorado Youth at Risk in Denver too, like 20 years ago, right? But I find that oftentimes it's the relationship between the mother and the child that's like a source of a lot of pain and wounding. So as I move forward in my journey with the Tiny Star Project, I'm realizing that my gifts really align with acknowledging and putting more attention on this relationship between mothers and their children. So as I move forward, my shift is my focus is shifting a little bit. I'm shifting towards this, looking at this relationship between mothers and their children, and even us being children of mothers, right? So we're either a child or a mother, all of us. So my focus moving forward is really going to be on supporting that relationship, and doing
kind of holding the torch for that.
Yeah, just really teaching mothers specifically how to make that connection despite what's happening, whatever the circumstances are. Like you're saying, we have busy lives, and I'm not perfect at it. This is something I still continue to struggle with, right? I feel like it's the hero's journey. It's like we go into this, we see a problem. If we're willing to go into it, there's potential for transformation. And it's never going to be stable. It's never going to be the same. And this is really something about motherhood that I value, and I feel like it's been my enlightenment, is that I can't hold on to anything too tight. As a mother, you just can't hold on to anything so tight, because it's constantly changing. And if we allow our children to be who they are, they will really teach us. They really will. We can almost follow their lead. Yeah, if we're willing to go to the darker places.
Okay, so you were the person willing to go into the unknown, to explore what you needed to explore as a mother, to find out the best way for you to nourish and nurture your children.
Yeah.
How can you streamline that for the everyday mom? How can you make it available to the mainstream mom, if you will, who is struggling with their kids on a societal level or on a level of, pure survival.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe first I will address that survival issue, because I've been there, right? Where it's like, it's all you can do to just move forward. And everybody gets this, whether you have kids or not,
Right.
if you're in the world, you have this. But there is something specific, I think, to mothers that I see now that is different than I saw, 10 years ago, or maybe that was even happening 50 years ago, right? If you look at our society 50 years ago, there was more of a container, like a net for mothers, an inherent resource. Like my grandmother lived down the street from her mom, right? They were all in the same area, so there was a lot of support in this way.
Community.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I think even though the digital age provides us with some of that, and I see a lot of moms accessing that, which can be really powerful, but I think it's missing a little bit of the connected element that we're talking about in terms of, you connecting with your mentors, right? Your life would have never been the same had you not made those deep, more intimate connections. And so I think as a culture, we're seeing a lot of numbing out, right? And for moms specifically, alcohol, drugs, Facebook, whatever it is, right? We're kind of, there's this stream of numbing out that can happen.
Like distractions. Hey.
That can really disconnect us from this light that I'm talking about, and what the path looks like from realizing there's a light to like making it manifest and doing it over and over again. It's not a one-time deal.
Right.
This is an over and over again process. And when you have children, you cannot avoid it. They won't let you. They will not let you avoid it. So that's the unique journey of motherhood, I think, and the thing that I really would like to support mostly. So I wanted to address that, that what's happening in society now that may be different than what was happening before, and on this evolution of really becoming conscious of all these things. So how to support them, you asked. This is something I'm continually asking myself, how to support women. So this is something I am really digging deep into based on the mothers I know and the mothers I see and relate to. And I think part of that is a mentorship process, like being a mentor to moms. And I'm still in it, right? I've got 4 teenagers at home right now. So, the degree to which I can mentor might be a little bit, specific right now. So I plan on doing that, but it's not going to be like I can do it all, right? I'm not really intending to do it all. So that will be part of what I'm going to do as we move into 2020, and also providing small groups and really small communities of mothers who are interested in digging deep into this journey, and really not just showing up to soccer games and PTA meetings and being there for every parent-teacher conference and, having the sort of perfect life. I'm really interested in working with mothers who see this as a real sacred journey. And so there will be some of that as well. And then the retreats. So my retreats are going to shift towards mothers specifically, and really supporting the first step of that journey, which I think is self-forgiveness, like forgiving ourselves for anything that we've done.
I read that in what I got from you, and I was like, oh, I'm not even a mother, and that sounds hard work.
It's
That's
real.
hard work.
Yeah, it's real. And it's not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
This is like an over and over again process. So, but I believe that's the first step, and really acknowledging that we don't need to be perfect. We need to be us. But we need to be us. And our children will continue to ask us to show up more and more for them. And when we're willing to be imperfect, then our children get the benefit of being like becoming alive through our authenticity. So they get to really then start to show up. And I don't care if they're 2 or 10 or 15 or 25, like it doesn't matter, because the unique connection between mothers and children doesn't go away. Like it just doesn't go away. So part of that first step is self-forgiveness, and also gratitude for those that came before us.
Yeah.
Right? This is like a conscious stream of feminine motherhood, sacred
Nurturing.
energy. So part of my journey was looking back at my relationship with my mother, and really, and still it's a work in progress. Every time I see her, I go, she is such an interesting character. Right? Like, it just is. So
I think there's this one quote I love that's, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a weekend with your parents.
Yeah, totally. This is why I think as parents we have such an opportunity to really look at this and to shift that and really open a space for our children to be fully themselves and to unconditionally love them.
I always believed as a mother myself that I would have to be whole, or strive for wholeness at least, to or health at least, to be a better mother to my child. Can you talk a little bit about how, if you are working on yourself to become a healthy person, then almost by default the child is healthier in the process of that?
Sure. So I talk with a lot of mothers who struggle with not being able to do everything for their child, or feeling inadequate in some way. This idea of like, oh, I'm not enough, you know, I can't show up in the way I really want to. And what I say is show up exactly how you are. And I believe this is what the spiritual journey requires of us. Like, in order to really embrace that light, you have to show up in the dark, deep pit of it all and just be like, here I am. It's really dark here. And I believe the same is true for our children. So when they see us authentically tired or exhausted or crying or working through something really difficult, they get to tap into that light, that spiritual place of authenticity.
That permission.
Yeah. And it really is like a beautiful place. So I talk to moms and they'll be like, gosh, I can't do this with I have a 2-year-old and, you know, I can't play with them. Oh, lay on the bed and tell them mommy needs a rest, you know, mommy's resting. Turn on yoga nidra and, you know, show them what it's like to rest. You know, we have a culture of depressed, you know, teens right now, anxiety and,
I love that.
you know, and I feel like mothers have a unique opportunity to demonstrate health and wellness, both mentally, physically, spiritually, to children just by allowing that space, right? And so to me, depression is like, you need deep rest. All you need is deep rest. So I feel like that's what it would look like, right, for a mother.
Because a lot of mothers, I feel, they want to take care of their children first. And sometimes they don't take care of themselves. But you're saying that if you come raw, you come real, you come with your authentic self, the child will naturally succumb to that energy and relate to that as being real, so they can too become their authentic self.
Yeah. So they will have permission. It will be like okay, I don't have to be perfect either. I just don't have to. And I can take a rest and I can be upset.
And I can feel my emotions no matter what they are.
Yeah, so I really think it's and children are perfect imitators, especially 0 to 7, right? Their whole task is to imitate us. So if we are imitating rushedness, an absence of real presence and doingness, that's what they're going to replicate. And there's an emptiness to that is
It'll follow you all the way into adulthood,
Yes.
and that's a lot harder to break when you're
Yes.
you know, in these relationships, which is I also think kind of brings us back to the point of you saying that missing piece of connectedness. If they're not taught at a young age, and how can we blame them, because we didn't know, our parents didn't know. And I'm not a mother, but I had kind of emotionally absent parenting in my life, not from my mother. I've always had graciously a really strong mother figure, so that's energy I'm very familiar with. But I do understand the lack of connectedness in children at teaching, like, at-risk kids. They don't even know how to connect to people anymore as an adult. And then that lack of relationship or connectedness to the person that they desire, maybe on an intimate level or a platonic level or any sort of intense connection that they want to explore more, that isolation and that loneliness feeling, that dread that comes over them because they don't know how to connect with the person they see in front of them is very, very daunting.
Yeah.
I would think.
For sure. And I feel like it's a multi-dimensional process, right? So for me, it's like I used to have this save the world complex, right? Like even bringing home two children from Liberia, you know, and really wanting to make a positive impact, or teaching, right, in Denver public schools, or whatever it is. I wanted to have a positive impact. But what I'm learning more now is that my task is to really acknowledge my own journey and story, and pull the gifts into the world that are specific and unique to me, right? So stepping away from teaching general education, right, in the classroom, to really being like, I want to focus on children's social emotional abilities and health and their spiritual development. And then even realizing from that, based on teaching and being in girls groups with, you know, young children, I see that it starts with a mother. It like really starts with the mother.
Well, it's so interesting to hear you talk, because I hear soft skills, and I actually would like to ask you about how, because like I keep saying, I'm not a mother, so it's difficult for me to offer advice no matter how spiritual aligned I might feel in that moment. I don't have specific advice to mothers. But I hear this theme of, one, boundaries, basically, with accepting the fact that this is what I'm here for. This is the part of the ecosystem I was made to kind of help flourish and keep the flow going. And then the other soft skill I keep hearing come up for you is this, and it kind of bounces off your question about how do you apply that to a streamlined day, is this idea of will and resiliency. Will, resiliency, and boundaries, I think, are very prominent in your theme of motherhood, from what I'm picking up on you right now.
For sure. So boundaries has been something I've had to learn as an older adult, right? I didn't even know, it wasn't like super skilled at it before. Now I feel much better about it, even with my children, right? Even we're required as our children get older to really create healthy boundaries with them and with anyone we're relating with. So I feel like that is a huge part of what I would teach and like relay to mothers, right? Is that aspect. And also to the will factor, I mean, I believe that there's a certain requirement for alignment in order to have willpower. And there's a thinking, feeling, and willing aspect to every human being, right?
So it's not will first, and if you don't have the will, if you're not doing it, you're not lazy.
Yeah, because will runs out. It's not endless. We don't have endless will. Will is limited, and it's with each specific person. They might have stronger will at different times of the day and different seasons and all of that. So to me, it's like an alignment of thinking, an alignment of feeling, and an alignment of willing, which is what you end up like sort of, you know, manifesting or producing in the world. So, but I believe it requires all three. It requires an attentiveness to all three things to align that. So yeah, that's just based on my own experience, right? And my own misalignment in a lot of ways.
Misaligned. Like you said, the dark places when you figure out, okay, I need to figure out how to turn the light on here. Where is it?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the experience you had in the adoption process and what you felt spiritually or inspired by or to do?
Yeah. So I always have had a heart for Africa as a continent since I was a little child. I don't even know where it came from. I can find drawings of like African villages and things like that. So it's sort of otherworldly for me. I did have a multicultural family in the sense that my mom married an African American. So later in life, so that could have been part of it too. But as soon as I found out it was possible to adopt from somewhere in Africa, which happened to be Liberia for me, I was totally determined, like this idea of will. I was like, oh, I am doing that. That's like a way that I can still take care of my family and also contribute to helping other children. Because there's one thing I've realized that's sort of dear to me and special to me is that I see my children as sort of all the children. So whatever my children are struggling with, like there's other children. Yeah, like there's a unity consciousness to this idea of children. And so even when I was 19 and I had my first child, I was donating milk to the mother's milk bank, right? There was something in me that was like, okay, I can feed my child, but how can I feed another child? And you know, with teaching, right, you are in service. Even teachers hold this role of like the motherhood connection sometimes, right?
At least in the most nurturing environments that I've been a part of.
Yes. And so I believe that this idea of sacred motherhood can actually exist even if you're not a biological or adoptive mother, right? So I want to like make that clear. It's just I happen to be focusing on helping, you know, women who are raising children, you know, either biologically or adopted children. So so I've always had this desire to help other children too, and bringing them home. First of all, visiting the country was like a huge spiritual awakening. It took me 6 months to integrate what I saw there, basically, and what I learned that my children had seen there. Just corruption and a lot of difficulty and challenge, and also a lot of natural joy that comes from people who are really in desolate situations, right? So there's a lot of desperation there in motherhood in that environment, right? They're desperate to like provide their children with something better. And in Liberia specifically, the parents aren't necessarily gone, like passed away. They're just desperate, right? The children have malaria. My daughter had malaria several times before we picked her up. They were in the orphanage for a year. And my son had a lot of experiences in you know, in his family and with his older brother who was actually in a war camp. So he came home chanting literally like death threats. So it was a really big spiritual awakening for me to really open myself, you know, to taking on really someone else's children, right? And in this specific case, it's really like the soul of the world almost. That's what it feels like. Adoption feels like you're adopting the soul of the world, because it's not necessarily, the children are coming through you physically by birth, where it's like a super mystical gift and we just don't get it, right? We can manage to not acknowledge the mystical gift of childbirth when it just happens, right? Based on something we're already doing. When you go out to adopt a child, to say yes to someone else's child and bring them into your home and your life and your heart and your being, it's like a whole different thing. It's like nothing you can ever, I feel like I could never replicate this process in anything else. So it was a real eye-opener in that way, and a real gift. And so when they came home, it was like relearning this process all over again. It was like, who am I? Oh my gosh, I can't possibly do this. Am I good enough? How am I going to make this happen?
Revisiting that sense of identity as a mother on a whole different level.
Yes.
Yes.
So bringing them home was one of the most impactful things on my journey of motherhood, and really relearning how to mother children that I didn't birth, which is a different process and just as sacred and valuable, and learning how to develop a real connected relationship with you know, my children who were adopted. So it's definitely a journey, and it's always reoccurring, but I have a special relationship with them that I feel like I've been able to develop over time. And just the other day, one of my teenagers said, "You guys have the funniest relationship." My son and I, he's 18 now, right? They've been home for 11 years now. So they've been here more time than they were in their own country. So yeah, and we bicker back and forth, but there's a lot of love there and a lot of connection. And I had a mom visiting who happens to also be an adoptive mom of several children. And the kids all came home for lunch, and she was like, "Geez, your kids are hugging you and they come home for lunch." And I was like, you know, these are the moments where you go, okay. I'm doing something. Yeah, like, okay.
Right. That reminds me of a time when I had all the kids over the house, and I said, I had just met you, and I said, "God, Malo, I love your mom." He's like, "Yeah, me too." Oh. And I thought that was really apropos and adorable.
Sweet. Yeah. So I feel really fortunate that, you know, through this deep dive, I've also been able to have that connection, because it was challenging. It's not easy to attach to children when they're 6 or 7 years old and they've had really another mother, right, and another experience. So, and So yeah, that brought me to another level and a different step of motherhood, which might also lead us into talking a little bit about people who are not mothers and how they can connect to this conversation of really sacred and authentic mothering. And like I said to you earlier, I believe that anyone in a position to care and nurture for another human being, or another being, I should say, is carrying the energy of the sacred mother. Yeah. Right? I don't care if it's a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a child, a child that you're teaching. There are many ways in which I believe that we as women have an opportunity to embrace this sacred motherhood, and children, and also people who are in need. Right? I believe that children are truth tellers. So they will constantly be telling the truth in some way, not verbally necessarily intellectually, but spiritually. Mm-hmm. So if you're able to pay attention to or be in a position of influence for children, I believe that is like sacred mothering, right? So there's an opportunity there for you as a woman to ask, like, what is this child asking me to be? Mm-hmm. Because I believe that children continually ask us to be our authentic selves. So if you are a woman out there who's not necessarily a mother, where in your life can you really pay attention to the energy of a child or someone who is in need of care and nurturing?
Wow.
And how can you embrace that relationship in such a way that it awakens the sacred mother within you?
It's funny that you said that, because as a teacher, you probably can relate as well. I find that I'm a mother to one child, mm-hmm. but I am a mother to many children in the classroom. But I find that with what you just said, just sparked the idea that perhaps I played almost a different type of mothering role to each child that called for what they wanted from me.
Yeah.
So I think that goes along with what you're saying as far as, you don't have to be a mother, a biological mother, an adoptive mother to mm-hmm. any specific child, but the children call to you to step into that role. Completely. So I think I just had a little epiphany because of that.
That brings it back, because I feel the same way when I was in my classroom. Mm-hmm. As each child, you learn to develop a relationship and a rapport with each individual child based on what they need without even knowing that that's what they need. It's kind of like an intuitive, sacred part of the mother that I think that's what you're speaking on. I guess my question would be my struggle in trying to maintain a group of 26 kids and having to individually pay attention to every single one of them. How do you not miss the beat? Like, there's something that's gotta get under you, no? When you're, especially with 6 children in the house and you're all the different roles you play. And
sure. So you're asking, like, how do you do it? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, kind of. It was this, like, say I had one student who needed me to be more present emotionally, and then I had one student who needed me to be more present in a different way.
Sure.
And that required, let's say, more time.
Yeah.
Air quotes.
Sure. Yeah. So this is a struggle with a large family, right? If that's what you're asking specifically.
And any larger mass group of nurturing beings in a large quantity.
So I believe that, like, really embracing our I, like our connection with the divine, is like first and foremost. So and really intentionally calling in that being, sort of like your spiritual essence for you and the children. So this is something I did when I taught. So I would really intentionally call in all the higher beings for the children, right? This is a little bit more esoteric, but it's something that I believe is powerful and makes a difference if you pay attention to it. So I do that at home too, right? I'll do a ton of spiritual work that has nothing to do with me, actually talking to the, 13-year-old child who's, got the hood on and all this stuff. So, and I'm not perfect. Like, it's a struggle, right? It's like some days I'll be like, geez, how connected was I to this child today, right? So it's presence. It's constantly coming back to presence. So I have a process that I do at night. I review my day, right? And I will literally go through my day backwards. And it helps me to, first of all, digest like what happened during the day, but it also helps me to see the faces of the children again, right? And really ask myself, did I make a connection there? Was I really present when, you know, whether it's school or at home, like when that child walked through the door? So it gives me like a daily reflection of asking the question, how present was I today? And then I take that into sleep, which I believe is like a super spiritual process. And it's a really helpful tool that I share with the moms that I work with, right? To touch into that connection on a daily basis, right? So
I'd like to add to that because again, you brought up something that was interesting and talking about people who aren't mothers to children, having all the kids in the house, even in my home. I have one child, but sometimes there's up to 15 kids in my house.
Yeah.
And with that said, I find that I want to make sure that I'm present when they come into the house. They're not my children, but I want to make sure that they're present to give them the attention or what have you they need in my presence, in my home. And that, I think, also can be the mothering role that is, they're not my children,
Completely.
but I naturally tend to them as if they are my own.
Right.
And I feel like it's a conscientious thing, though, that I do.
Yeah.
So it's a conscientious practice to be aware of all the children's emotions and thoughts and what they're going through in the daytime. It's hard to differentiate sometimes with the different personality traits and the different mood swings and such.
Yeah, this actually goes back to boundaries a little bit too, right? This is why I believe that when we create an energetic boundary for ourselves and really embrace our inner I or our like inner god or goddess, really, that we don't actually have to know everything. Like we don't have to know everything about that kid's experience. You know, we could really read the field, like the energetic field. And this is what I think a life of alignment looks like. You learn to pick up on energy and frequencies that you may not have before. Right, so like I've been looking into this energy psychology a lot.
I saw that.
I went to a conference in May. It was really fascinating. So I believe, again, with children, they're much easier to connect with in this way because I believe that children are closer to the spiritual world, and they are less tainted than we are. So if you are not a mother and you have the honor of being in a child's presence, then you know, you could look at your task or your really command to be present with that child in a really super magnificent and magical and mystical way, right? And that would tap you into this sacred motherhood that we're talking about. So so I feel like it's much more than you know, paying attention to what's happening in the physical realm and more attunement to energy.
So if you could walk us through, I liked that it was called the aligned lifestyle. A good day, quote unquote, a day where you feel very aligned and in tune, your practices from the morning to the time you go to bed and reflect on your day, and what that looks like on a day where you feel like you weren't aligned, and how those practices and how that went about for you.
Yeah. So I think you have to bring a lot of humor to this because it's comical. Like you just have to laugh at it sometimes. Like when I came to this interview, there was like a safety pin clipped to my, you know, scarf, and I was like, oh, awesome! I've worn the scarf like 3 times and I've never taken the safety pin off. Right? It's just like you have to be a little bit able to laugh at your ability to. Can we cuss on here? To mess up.
Yes, we can.
I was gonna
if
say,
it's authentic, cuss away.
Yeah, like I was gonna say to really like fuck up, you know. So I don't even think there's a good or bad day. I think it's like, are you present for the day? Then you're okay. You're doing it.
Okay.
You're doing it. Like do I have an ideal day? Totally. I totally have an ideal day. and I'm not sure I've ever actually experienced it, but I create the feeling over and over again, right, in my system, in my body, with a meditation, and I do meditate daily. So this is a practice I would like recommend to someone, to a mother who's like trying to access this authentic, sacred journey. But I really believe presence is the ultimate key. And so whatever you're in, one thing we know for sure is things are always changing. So you're not going to be stuck there forever. If you're allowing things to move, then you will go with it. Like, you will not get stuck there.
Right.
So in that way, that's what I consider like a good day, if you're present with everything.
When you're going with the flow.
Yeah. And there are practices. I believe in rhythm. I believe that rhythm replaces strength. So this is something that Rudolf Steiner said, and I believe it's true. So there are points in your day where you can have things you can count on. And children really, I think, love this. They love to be able to count on something, right? So
consistency and reliability is...
Yeah, so as much as you can do that with children and be flexible, like there's a whole paradox to this too, especially if you have a large family. And even if you don't, you know this, schedules and things like that. But if there can be a rhythm to your day and to what you're really doing as a mom, or as a person who's interacting with children, it's really helpful, I think, to bring in that sort of stream of enlightenment that can happen when you're relating with children. So I believe that's important. And for me, that means yoga, that means meditation. And there are some weeks when it doesn't happen too, and it's okay, right? It's messy. Mostly meditation happens pretty much every day for me now, but yoga, I mean, I might go 5 or 7 days without going to a yoga class, right? But you can do asanas anywhere. I do it at the airport. I do it at the soccer game. I mean, I probably look so weird, but I don't really care.
Well, you're giving permission to everybody else to do so.
Yeah, I do tapping like in the middle of wherever. Yeah. So there are tools that I believe mothers specifically, or people working with children, can do to get into that aligned space. And it can happen anywhere. It can happen in your bed before you wake up. It can happen in the kitchen when you're doing dishes. It can happen literally when you're driving in the car next to your child and your child doesn't want to talk to you. There are exercises you can do to open up to that channel and to really make that connection. There are actually things you can do.
And that goes back to taking care of yourself as a mother, and then, hopefully working toward becoming a healthy person for yourself, so that by default you could be a better mother, or a healthier mother, more present mother,
or any person who holds space for another.
Any person who holds space for that
human being or being
another human, right?
Yeah,
true.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah.
So what about your mission? How can you extend your mission to, I don't know, help others on the outskirts of, say, Broomfield or Denver, or
being as like I've learned that I can't do everything. This is just in development, right? I don't have all the answers for anything that is in the future, but I'm just taking it one step at a time and really being called to re-examine it every step. Like, is this too much? Is it enough? Because right now I have a regular job also, so so it's a little bit of really staying focused on being harmonious. And I've got 2 kids about ready to go to college, so so that is this is a special time, right, of like getting a few young people out the door really to start their lives on their own. So eventually I think I'd like to serve any mothers anywhere. And I think it does start with our own hearts and our own families or classrooms or relationships, but that basically due to technology today we can offer a lot to the world too. So
being that you have taught in the classroom, have you thought about extending any enrichment programs to any charter schools for
in the
example?
education system?
So I think my view of the education system is that I'm still passionate about it in a lot of ways, and my children are still in the system. So my focus right now is really working on my children who are in the educational system, right, on a really personal level. So it's like volunteering for homecoming, right? The homecoming dance a couple of weeks ago, and like, you know, taking kids off the dance floor who are a little too excited. Yeah. So it's really like
doing the work
down
on
home.
the gym floor.
Yeah, it's a little bit more localized.
My
for me
son
at the
tells me
moment.
this. He's like, Mom, Miss Amanda was in the mosh pit.
I'm not afraid of them.
What do you want to tell people for how to reach you or for upcoming events? Or?
So right now I'm running New Moon Circles for all women. You don't have to be a mother. And girls groups for girls ages 12 to 14. And you can reach me at my website, which is www.tinystarproject.com. And there is a contact, and it has all the upcoming events for what I'm doing. And you can also follow me on Instagram, which is Tiny Star Project. And I'm also on Facebook under the same title, Tiny Star Project. And if this is something you feel really passionate about, like you're ready to start this journey or really investigate it more, I have developed a little Mama Mojo call that I like to do, and just really talking with moms about this and seeing if it's something they'd like to really move forward in working with me on a more mentorship or individual basis or with a small group.
So individual support.
Yeah. Like you know, we were talking about mothers used to have a lot of support, and now I find that mothers have very limited support. So I'm really passionate about that, having individual relationships with mothers. So that would be just, you know, contact me from the website and we can schedule a way to get your Mama Mojo back.
Yeah, and if anybody does want to contact you, they'll be able to find you on our websites as well, thewisdomvillage.net, the Wisdom Village social, for all of our social media platforms. We'll have your tag, we'll have your bio, we'll have little snippets of this conversation, and definitely ways to contact you, because needless to say, I think what you're doing in this world is absolutely jaw-dropping, revolutionary, breathtaking, necessary, incredible, and beautiful.
And reverberating throughout the universe.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for just giving me a platform to share my story and share the work that I'm doing. So thank you.
You are very welcome.
Thank you.
We want to thank our guests for coming on the show today and sharing their story with us. We hope that something in today's show resonated with you. We believe that by talking about our journeys and getting personal, we can tap into this beautiful human experience and realize that we are not alone. Wisdom Village is here to inspire and support you on your path to discovering your true self. For more information, head over to wisdomvillage.net.